Welcome to Distilled, where we bring you insights, intelligence, and innovation. And today we are distilling community. Distilled is brought to you by International Creative Practice Distillery. I'm Steve Wheen, CEO of Distillery, and thank you for joining us today, whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn Live, or Instagram. Don't forget, you can join the conversation by using the chat feature, and we'll dive into your questions either at the end of the session or following the session online. Now, today I'm joined by Josh Zerkel. Josh is a seasoned community-led growth and engagement leader with over 20 years of experience building thriving communities for both startups and established global brands. He's an award-winning community engagement and education programs that he's led those at notable organizations, including Asana, Evernote, and HeyGen. And he's also advised plenty of companies on community strategy to help them foster genuine connections and drive growth. Working on a global scale, working across North America, Europe, and Asia, he's demonstrated his ability to connect with diverse markets and drive meaningful impact, creating inclusive and scalable community strategies that resonate across regions. He's a seasoned speaker, and in fact, I first met Josh about a year ago when we worked on a panel together all around building brand trust for the Customer Marketing Alliance. As a certified professional organizer, I definitely want to learn more about that. Josh has dedicated much of his career to empowering individuals and businesses to enhance their productivity to achieve their goals. He brings a unique blend of community expertise, operational efficiency, and a passion for creating impactful experiences, making him a trusted leader in the field of community engagement and growth. But why are we discussing community today? Why are we distilling community? That's because at Distillery, we've seen the business impact of the communities that we fueled across sectors such as B2B marketing, building communities of CEOs or IT decision makers or developers, to the creator and influencer space where we've grown and educated communities of creators, to building communities of fundraisers for charities. The common thread through all of these audiences is ensuring that we're delivering business impact for the organizations that we're working with. And you cannot show business impact without some sort of measurement. So thank you so much for joining me this morning, Josh. I'm really excited to dive in. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Steve. I'm doing well. I'm super happy to be here. I love talking about all things community, and I'm happy to share with everyone who is watching live and on the recording today.
Amazing, amazing. Look, I want to start off our conversation today by looking at the business impact. The common theme that we're hearing at this time of year, everyone's going into planning for next year. Look, the economic budgets are tight. We're being asked to do more with less. So I want to dive into the power of community right now. And as you're such a seasoned community builder, what's the business impact and why are communities so important?
It's a good question, and I think a fair one. I think the simplest way to think about community is it's really the future of how people are going to buy and sell things. Whether you're in B2C or B2B, no one really wants to be sold things. We're all bombarded with marketing messages all day long. People don't pick up the phone to answer sales calls. But what they do instead is when they need something, they ask people. They ask people in their network. They ask trusted colleagues. They ask friends. And in fact, according to Channel Insider, 6 out of 10 buyers and decision makers in the tech space look to other people before they come to make any sort of purchasing decision. And that is the power of community. When you foster groups of people who have a shared interest, who do a similar type of work, or are interested in a product or service, that's when you get people talking to one another, sharing ideas, giving advice, and thereby making all the processes that go into going to market a lot easier because people are already excited and talking about what it is that you do. So to me, I think given how much we're already bombarded with sales and marketing messaging, this is the future of how people are going to receive messages that matter.
So that idea of trust, talking to your community, talking to your colleagues, your friends. I think that might be a common theme running through our discussion today.
Mhm.
And I'd like to kick off in the B2B space. What are the ways a community can positively impact B2B marketing?
Yeah, I think it really leans into that notion of authenticity, because all of community is based around the most important people who are part of your company, your customers, and their authentic voice, what they're talking about, what's important to them. And so when it comes to the benefits that a business can get out of having people authentically interested in what it is that you're doing, it's essentially everything that a go-to-market team would need. Everything from authentic customer advocacy for any of your campaigns, whether you need a customer quote or story or an example to include in your marketing, everything under the sun comes along. So some of the tangible things might be case studies or videos for a launch or a campaign, or if you're doing a product launch, having people that you precede with messaging that can then amplify your launch once it goes live. As you've seen, Steve, like things like event speakers, like how you and I met. When people are interested in your community, you have people that start rising to the top that you can then pull from, tap on their shoulder and say, hey, we'd like you to participate in this thing that we're doing. One thing that I was really interested in when building the communities that I led was, as companies grow, especially within regions or globally, you start having individuals who want to advocate on your behalf on those places that you're moving into, which is incredibly valuable, especially as you're trying to tackle new markets. And then finally, the simplest thing of all, social amplification, both online and offline. When you have people excited about your brand, your product, your service, they're going to talk about it, and they're going to reach people that you can't yourself reach via traditional marketing messages.
I couldn't agree with you more, Josh. And I think you could argue the fact that marketing wouldn't exist without community, because all marketing needs an audience. You know, we've seen time and time again the importance of building trust, especially in the B2B space, working with our tech clients. You know, that true, authentic storytelling, that voice of the customer from real humans that resonates, you know, with other real humans, human to human, and with the multiple touch points during the complex, you know, B2B marketing funnel or sales funnel. That trust is so incredibly important. But but then turning that lens to product, how does community feed into the product space?
Yeah, I think it's easy to miss that community can play a key role in product, just like it does in the go-to-market functions. If we think about who products are for, they're typically for customers. And when you have customers involved and offering feedback and in conversation with the product teams, the things that get developed are just much better. So one of the things that I found that product teams really like is access to actual users who are engaged with the product, so that when they're developing something or they need feedback, they have a ready pool of people that they can ask. Community is super powerful for that. And for the follow-on things like A/B testing that come from a product being developed and needing additional feedback. Once a product is developed, then one thing that I thought was really great that I'd done at some communities that I led was, when you have a pool of people who are excited, you can give them hints and roadmap insight that you might not want to give to the general public. That gets these people really excited about what you're developing, so that when it finally hits the market, there's already conversations ready to go about how much these people love what it is that you're building. And this can all be formalized into a voice of customer or a voice of community feedback loop. So there's a continual stream of feedback from customers who matter into the product development lifecycle. And then, as I mentioned before, when you do these launches based on all the feedback, you can tie it all back together. You can tell the community, we built this thing based on your feedback. Here's what we did with it. Here's what we're making. Please go share this with your network. It creates a really powerful reinforcement cycle that everyone gets something out of, which is one of the key values that you want to create when you're doing a community program. Is there has to be something in it for the company and for the customer. And this is a really great way to tie that together.
Yeah, that reinforcement cycle, I think that really aligns with one of the key contributions that we had for our recent white paper, Beyond the Case Study.
Mm.
One of our contributors, Andrew Sevilla from UiPath, he talked to us at length about harnessing that feedback loop and the power of the voice of the customer, and really harnessing negative feedback into product iterations, and really leaning into that, not shying away from that negative feedback. And he talked a lot about turning a disheartened customer around and really into one of their biggest advocates, and that was all through the simple act of listening. And I think that is so often overlooked, and I think very much leans into that theme of community.
Agreed.
Sorry, yeah, and trust. I know, Josh, as we were preparing for this chat, you had another really interesting example around Peloton.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we often hear when talking just about community in a B2B or B2C setting is community as a competitive moat. I think that's a bit reductive. I think community can do and should do a lot more and create value more so for the customer than for the business, because that's how you get all the benefits. But one example that really stood out to me of how community can really help buoy a business was Peloton. I mean, Peloton soared during the pandemic. And then as soon as people started going back to work and back to gyms, things weren't so great. But one of the things that really kept Peloton going and continuing to exist as a company is the really strong community and community experience they built. I'm not a Peloton user, but when I talk to people who are, they are crazy about this thing and how much value they get from having other people in their network who also are part of this Peloton community is one of the things that keeps them sticking around. And I think this is just a good example of when business is good, community can help things be even better. And when things are challenging, they can help keep things going so that you can still refigure out what you want to do and directions that you want to go in with your business. Because you still have people who are excited. And when you have people who are excited, it just gives you a lot of oxygen to continue to breathe.
Mm-hmm. And so then are communities, in that gray area between the buyer and the seller?
Mm-hmm. Community, it's kind of at every touch point on the customer journey. And so I like to think about it as building relationships at scale. It's the relationship between the company and its customers and the customers and each other. It's really distinct and different from other forms of marketing where, if we send a marketing email, hopefully people click on it and then something happens. But if we're in community, we're engaging in an ongoing conversation. I send out a message to the community. If I do my job well, they respond and we continue the conversation. That is relationship building. And that's why it's in this gray area between buyer, seller, company, customer. And it's impossible to predict exactly what direction these conversations and the relationships will take, like any relationship. But if you put intention into these relationships, if you frame a community program in a way that's creating value for the company and for the customers who are participating, that's how you end up building these really strong communities that can help the buyer journey all along their path through becoming aware of a company, getting interested in a specific product or service, making a purchasing decision, and then becoming a user and an advocate. That is the gray area, the entirety of it, because you never know exactly where a customer is going to be on that life cycle when they first encounter a community, but you can help enhance their experience at every point in that journey for sure.
Mm-hmm. I want to pick up on your point there around advocacy, and really dive into the power of customer advocacy, because people like talking about what they like. And from our experience at Distillery, working with all sorts of customer advocacy programs, we work very hard on new ways to amplify the voice of the customer stories, customer advocacy, and the impacts our clients' products are having on their clients' businesses, and indeed their customers' customers. So how does that play into community, and how do you go about building out a structure around that?
Yeah, I think most companies are trying to make their customers happy. And when customers are happy and you create a community program for them to harness that happiness, that excitement, that enjoyment of your product or service, then people start getting excited to advocate on your behalf. Because as you'd mentioned, Steve, people like talking about things that they like. they don't always have the mechanism by which they can do that most easily. And they don't sometimes have examples of other people who are doing it. But when you capture all of that into a community program with a bit of structure, then people can start understanding, what's the best way for me to talk about this thing that I like? What are other people doing with this tool that I enjoy? So structuring community-led growth and advocacy programs lays a foundation for these people who are already excited about what you do to harness that enthusiasm and help them share it with other people. Like in a community program, for example, you can share with them additional use cases for your product or service, and then give them a one sheet that then they can take to their own team to talk through ideas with them about how to leverage your tool in greater depth. Or you can send them postcards during the holidays to remind them and thank them for what they've accomplished this year using your tool, and encourage them to share it with one other person in their network. So there's mechanical things that you can do once you've harnessed this goodwill that you've built with your customers, but you need a program structured around that in order to make it happen.
And so I'm assuming that program structure would have metrics around it. You know, at Distillery, measurement is at the heart of everything that we do. And let's dive a little deeper into the metrics that matter, if that's all right. I'd like to look at the business impact of community building for business and the metrics around, really the metrics that matter there.
Yeah, I would say all community programs, like all parts of marketing and go-to-market, every function within a company should be measured. That's how we know whether what we're doing is working and whether we should change strategy or stay the course. I think the question of metrics with community is challenging, as it can be for many parts of marketing, because there isn't always a direct causative relationship. You do this with the community and this thing happens over here. It's often correlative, which can be a little bit more challenging to track, but still we should track what we can. The way that I like to think about community metrics is we should anchor on what the core thing the community is trying to do. So within a business setting, sometimes it's something like generate community influenced pipeline, or create a certain number of pieces of user generated content, or deflect from support tickets, which is often a core value of multiple community programs, and everything in between. So depending on where the community program sits within a given organization, whether it sits within marketing or product or support or customer experience, each of these core metrics that it's driving towards might differ. Usually they're decided upon with whoever the key stakeholder is who is responsible for the community program, based on whatever the larger business goals are. One of the things that I would say is, if you are starting a community program or trying to structure your goals around it, think about what are the other goals that the rest of the business already has, and determine how you can best align your community program's goals with the goals of the rest of the business. That way, when you're reporting on what you're doing on community, other people within the business understand what you're doing and how it levels up to the goals that are already shared within a company. And leveraging those goals, building your program to ladder up to them, then makes it easier for everyone else to understand. And it informs literally everything that you'll build, both initiative-wise and strategy-wide, for the entirety of your program. So really learn to speak the rest of the language of the business when setting your goals, but your goals can ladder up in a variety of different ways.
Mm-hmm. And the key metrics that community programs should be looking at around community building, Josh, we were discussing this earlier, and you mentioned tracking two different dimensions.
Yeah, I typically look at community metrics through two different lenses. One is business impact and the other is program health. So business impact is what the rest of the business cares about. Typically, they won't care that much about the number of members that you have or their engagement within the community program, but they probably really care about if your community program is anchored on community sourced pipeline or community attributed engagement growth. Those are the metrics that you want to report out to the business impact. I think of it in short as okay, you have a community program, so what? So what does your program do? So what does it affect this over here, and how? It's really the reason why your program exists, why someone like me would be hired and make a salary to build a community program. That's the why. And that is usually highly correlated, if not exactly connected, to other core goals that the business has. So it could be a top line revenue number, could be a bottom line retention number, but these goals that you have at the business impact level should be very similar, if not exactly the same, to other metrics or KPIs that the business already has. The other lens to look through is program health. This is, how is my program doing? Like, what is the health of the community program? So could be programmatic, like how many members are we recruiting on a regular basis, or how many events are we hosting and how many attendees are they getting? This helps you understand how your initiatives are doing. And if your initiatives are doing well, hopefully they are positively impacting the overall goals of your work, the business impact goals. But most stakeholders won't know or understand what goes on under the hood of your program. So these aren't metrics that you would typically report out to the rest of the business. So as a leader in a community program, you need to think about both, but they're not the same, and you wouldn't report on them to different groups in the same way.
Sure. So we've got business impact, program health.
Mm-hmm.
I now want to look at the different types of communities. And to start off with, I'd like to perhaps focus on B2B communities. How do you think B2B communities differ from, say, B2C communities?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about B2B or B2C, at the core of it, it's still the same. You're still talking to individuals. It's people who are joining a community program, not a brand or a logo. It's an individual working at a company, and they are experiencing your product or service in the context of their work or their lives. What's really different is the context and the experience that you want to create. So for instance, in a B2B context, people are often joining a community because they're using a product at work. They're trying to solve problems in the work context. They're trying to make their work lives easier or achieve something specific. And so it's important in a B2B context that you often develop programs that are results oriented because people are trying to do or achieve a thing. Whereas in B2C, they might be joining your program because they like the thing that you're doing and it's fun. You don't want to discount fun as part of the community experience. People usually go to things that they enjoy, but know that the goals and the context are different for someone who is joining in a B2B setting. Additionally, in the work setting, many of us don't choose the tools that we get to use. Sometimes they are foisted on us and we have to use them. And you may go to a community program to try to get answers or learn a new use case or connect with other people who are doing similar work to you. So know that the motivation level of people joining a B2B community might be different than someone who's joining a community from a product that they just happen to like or use in their personal world. The final dimension is in a B2B setting, oftentimes people are working as an individual within a larger team. And so they might be using your product or service in connection with other people. You can often help educate them how to do that more effectively or give them tools so that they can communicate about your tool or your product with the other people on their team. So there are definite differences when you're building a B2B community, and a lot of it has to do with the thinking and the context in which the individual participating in your community comes to the community from.
I think, in the B2B space, and we were talking about this just last week in our live stream where we were just focused on B2B marketing metrics. I think it's easy to forget B2B communities are still made of humans. We don't become robots when we go to work. And the complex nature of B2B sales in terms of your point around a team purchasing decision rather than an individual brings, again, this so much back to that theme of trust.
That's right.
And I think, again, one of the keys to success we've leveraged at Distillery for our clients is to really get under the skin and understand audiences, where they're at, where their pain points are, to ensure that all that messaging in our campaigns and that content is fueling the right conversations. I think the purchasing journey is so incredibly complex, and there's so many different touch points in the B2B space. It can feel like an individual's professional reputation is on the line. How can a community help there with that reputational piece?
Yeah, I think it's true. Anytime you are in a position of recommending a tool internally or making a purchasing decision, you are saying, like, I believe in this. I'm putting my professional experience behind it. and hope for the best. And when you're in a community, you can help make sure that you're making good decisions. For instance, you can ask people within your community, if it's for a product or service, like, I'm going to be recommending this tool. What are some arguments that people have made when trying to influence the purchaser? What is some data that I can leverage from the rest of the community about examples, use cases, other companies who are using this tool? It's down to that exact point of, like, people in a community are not their brand, they're not their logo. It's a person, and recognizing that people are building relationships of their own within their own work context. It lends itself to those person-to-person connections that only community can really do. So I think this is where a community can create resources for people who are in these buying decisions and on that buyer path, which can, especially in an enterprise, be quite complicated, to make those conversations easier and have more examples of other people who are doing similar things that can be useful when informing those conversations that they need to have internally with their stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Josh, really ensuring that we're building community in the right places or spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Time and time again, from distillery side, we see organizations trying to build communities in new places, new spaces, where their customers or target audiences don't naturally sit.
Mm-hmm.
For example, our work at distillery to engage with developers, means that we're diving deep into platforms like Reddit, which for some of our clients is completely new territory, trying to take people away from LinkedIn or Twitter, but the audiences just aren't there. So I wanted to turn the conversation now towards growing creator communities. We've had the experience of engaging, growing, and educating creator communities. And I think they have some unique levers, as so often it's being a creator is part of their career journey, their growth, their personal income, whether we're speaking to a Canva creator or a YouTuber or a Miro board creator. From your point of view, how do creator communities perhaps differ from consumer or B2B communities again?
It's interesting. Creator communities are kind of in the middle region between consumer communities and business communities, in that, like, usually in a creator community, it's very seldom like a team. It's usually an individual. But the context of them being a creator is typically because they're in business and want to make money. So it's interesting in that oftentimes they're lone wolves, but they need the resources of other people in order to get them the ideas, the information, the skills, and the connections they need to be successful. So I think one of the things is, one, recognize that you're still speaking to individuals because you're in a community. These are real humans. But what they need is different. The context, again, is different. They often need or want ideas for content creation, strategies, especially for making their processes easier, faster, to better understand business concepts that can help them up-level the opportunities that they're getting to have. One thing that I think is really interesting in a creator community, it's similar to like a community of consultants, each of whom has their own small business. Many of the people in these communities both are competitors with each other, but also colleagues of one another. They may perceive themselves as, this is a person I don't want to share ideas with because they might take them and then they'll leverage them and I can't. But oftentimes, if we create a community of cooperation, especially for people who are in creator communities or consultant communities, and encourage people to share ideas, it's fine, because everyone is always going to put their own unique spin on it. Especially for creators, a lot of it is about their personality, their persona, and who they are. No one's going to do it exactly the same way. And so I think encouraging that sense of sharing and true community, while may seem counter at first, it can actually create a community of trust that can be much more powerful.
There's that theme again, trust.
Yeah.
It's really weaving right through this conversation. And listen, we're coming up to time, Josh. So I think my last question I wanted to ask you. I cannot believe we've gone almost half an hour without talking about AI. Um, I wanted to ask you how you're seeing AI impacting community, and perhaps what impact do you think AI will have on community building in the future?
For now, I think, to be honest, as with many things AI, we're still trying to figure out how community will be impacted by AI. Community is made up of people. I mean, that at the end of the day, it's people building relationships. I don't think AI is going to supplant that, because otherwise there's no there. But I think AI is going to make the mechanics of running community programs easier. So, for example, right now, the usage of AI in community, for the most part, is largely limited to like content moderation, form moderation, etc., which is a challenging thing for humans to do. And it's definitely making that process easier. But I could see in the future, as AI gets more integrated into the types of tools community builders use, we'll probably expand into recruiting more members in an automated way, creating content that's relevant to specific segments of an audience, automating the workflow of people like me that have to do a lot of like hands-on work in order to build community, and probably some engagement strategies like automated member matching, making hosting events easier, and so on. But I think there's a wide open space here for AI and community, and that's not even talking about how it can help us measure the impact of our work, but that's all yet to come.
We've just had some input from one of our viewers as well, Luciana, talking about how trust and empathy is key. And I think it'll be interesting to see how trust, empathy, and empathy work, when we're embedding AI.
Yeah, I mean, it's like any relationship. Trust, listening, empathy, this is at the core of all good relationships. Communities, relationships at scale. How we factor a truly artificial intelligence, AI, into that, I don't know, but I'm curious to see.
Well, we'll find out over time.
Yeah.
Speaking of time, we're actually over time. I'm getting a couple of messages, so we'll need to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us today on Community Distilled. I think we've covered so much, from the business impact of community, the metrics that matter, B2B communities, creator communities, and touching on AI there. Thank you again for joining us, Josh.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
If you'd like to connect with Josh, he's on LinkedIn. We'll drop a link under the video, or there's a QR code on screen now. He's open to advising and consulting on community and go-to-market. So now is a great time to get in touch with him. Thank you for joining us for another Distilled session. So far in the series, we've distilled AI, pride, B2B marketing metrics, now community. Next up, we're going to be distilling customer marketing. It's going to be a fantastic discussion. I've organized a really brilliant guest that we'll be announcing very shortly. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on LinkedIn, or sign up via the QR code on Eventbrite to secure your ticket to our next event. Thanks again. I'm Steve Wheen, CEO of Distillery, where creativity is made to measure.